broadcast and co-host Patricia Lee. We're tuning in every Sunday from 11 until 12 right here on AM 1600 WMQM Lakewood in Memphis. He was out last week. I'm taking care of a little business. Wallace ready don't take care of junk, so he always take care of business. And I tell you what, he's coming up next. He was out last Sunday, but he is back today. None other than the Wallace Red Show. Love House coming up next right here on your station, AM 1600 WMQM Lakewood, Memphis. Get ready. He's coming up. He's got a crew. And he's right here on your station, AM 1600 WMQM Love House. Let's go.
I don't think we need.
Let me get real. Alan. Hold on, Alan. What's your question, Alan?
Do you think?
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, can you hear me on the Wallace?
Yeah, he can hear you.
Yeah, we're the majority in the city.
Yeah.
National. John Biden want to rally the troops to take over the Senate.
Uh-huh.
But they get power, they don't get inferior of us. But our mindset is messed up. We're already the majority in the city, and we barely get the crumbs off the table.
Really? I heard everybody. Well, we thank you for your comment on the Love Power Show, right, Alan?
All right.
Thank you. Now you don't got to deal with Alan. You got his 30 seconds of fame off the air. I'm sorry. He calls every week. He want to be heard. Is I'm lying? Wallace Red told me to call. You ready? Let's go.
I'm ready. Hey,
Welcome back.
welcome to the show, the Love Power Show. I am your humble host and moderator, Wallace Red, in the saddle today at the helm. And we have with us Mr. Jeffrey Steele.
Hello, how you doing?
Researcher and writer, degree in sociology and African American studies. And as usual, Brother Omar Baruti, also a researcher, a man of insight and knowledge. And in the interest of time, I won't hold you any longer. We're going to get right to work because today we are talking about Ebola, the virus, and the disease. And I want to say a couple of things about the brief history of Ebola. It says right here, in 1976. But as Jeremy has pointed out, he found some information that went back 2 years earlier, 1974. Named after the Ebola River in Zaire. First emerged in Sudan and Zaire. The first outbreak of Ebola infected over 284 people with a mortality rate of 53%. A few months later, the second Ebola virus emerged from Yambuku, Zaire, with the highest mortality rate of any of the Ebola viruses, 88%. Infected 318 people. Despite the tremendous effort of experienced and dedicated researchers, Ebola's natural reservoir was never identified. And that's a problem we have with these issues. We're going to take a look at it today. One last thing, the third strain of Ebola was first identified in 1989 when infected monkeys were imported to Reston, Virginia from Mindanao in the Philippines. Fortunately, the few people who were infected with this virus never developed Ebola hemorrhage fever. And we've heard about this fever. The last known strain of Ebola, Ebola cote, they say, I guess this is French, Diavere, Ebo-CI, was discovered in 1994 when a female ethologist performing a necroscopy on a dead chimpanzee from the Thai forest accidentally infected herself during the necropsy. I want to go to our newest panelist first. Brother Jeffrey, what about it?
How you doing, Mr. Red?
Fantastic. Glad to have you with us.
All right, I'm glad to be here. In my research, what I'm showing there, if I could correct a little bit, when I went back in my research and showed that it began in 1976, and it began in 1976 simultaneously in Zaire and Sudan, with the infection in Zaire actually being, like you said, a little bit more dangerous than the one, so to say, in Sudan. But what I actually did was I looked through a few articles to try to find which places in Africa where it hit the most. And I've got some figures whenever you want to go over that here later in the show.
Okay.
As far as cases and deaths in the different countries. And we're going to bring that all the way up to America.
Where we are today.
Correct.
I like that. We're going to come back to that. I want to go now to Omar Baruti. Omar, do you want to make a comment? Because I want to ask you something. Let me ask you this, and you tie it in for us. Is this, or does it appear to be, or does it concern you that this may be an act of population control?
Good afternoon, listening audience.
Glad to have you again,
Glad to be
always,
back.
anytime.
America is the most powerful country on earth. And if you search scripture, it's also the most wicked country on earth. There is no natural virus called Ebola. Ebola is a virus that was created in the 1930s, according to Dr. Alim Muhammad, Minister of Health for the Nation of Islam. And the virus was used as a weapon in Zaire to try to depopulate the country.
This was 1931?
1930s. They used a German scientists in Fort Detrick, Maryland. They came to Fort Detrick, Maryland to create this virus. And when the virus was created, it was designed to depopulate parts of Africa so they could take advantage of the mineral wealth of Africa. And there was an outbreak in the 1970s. There was an outbreak. And what had happened was that they wanted to try this virus on the people, the population of Zaire. And the president of Zaire said no. He didn't want his people used as an experiment. And it was just a couple of years later that they did it anyway. So Ebola is a weapon for population control.
All right, you answered that question. And oftentimes it's difficult to get at causes, especially things like this. So things are going on behind the scene that we have to dig deep into to come up with true information. Truth, let's call it truth, T-R-U-T-H. Is that right, Omar?
You know, Tulane University has been in that part of Africa. Guinea, and what are the other two countries that they have Ebola in?
Zaire.
Zaire, and two other countries.
Liberia.
Yeah, Liberia. They've been there
Guinea.
for over 10 years.
Guinea.
Experimenting with Ebola.
Okay.
And it was just this year, January of this year, when the outbreak came, right? That's when they started using their vaccination program. And in February, the State Department did not renew their grant program for $15 million.
Why not?
They said there was some technical problem with the grant, the way they wrote it up. But they've been there for 10 years experimenting with Ebola in a city called Kenema. So here's a Tulane University. That's their project. Ebola in that part of the world.
Tulane.
Tulane.
Okay.
Down in New Orleans.
Yes.
Yes. And so now they're saying, and of course, since they won't fund it, they're now pulling out of it. And now the American military is there. Why?
Okay.
Because you're going to have some riots when the people find out the truth.
Okay. Jeffrey, you've spoken about the military, and we've also talked about a possible cause and how we protect ourselves from this deadly virus. Is that right?
Yes.
So tell us about how it's contracted. Bodily fluids, is that right?
Well, we know about how the Ebola virus is contracted. Yes, sir, you're correct. What they're telling us is that it is contracted through bodily fluids, being around people who are infected and exchanging body fluids with people who are infected. And what I see as far as it being, the virus is actually more infectious than it is contagious because of that. And what I mean by that is that it only takes a little bit of the virus to cause you to be infected. However, because they have not proven it to be airborne, then they are not ready to say that it is highly contagious yet. But yet, and still, it is still infectious. So it's very important that we make a difference between it being infectious and being contagious, being highly contagious. Yes, it is very infectious. However, it's moderately contagious unless, because it is spread through bodily contact, what's proven is spread through bodily contact, and at this point it's not proven that it's airborne, so to say, as far as a virus in the air, floating in the air. But on another side, we can still say that it is airborne because it was brought to the United States both times in Virginia through aircraft by bringing in imported monkeys, and here recently through air travel from West Africa to America. So in that sense, yes, it is airborne.
Okay. Omar, does it make sense to consider Clorox in terms of it being the strongest infectant for germs, carrying germs around the home and house, and maybe perhaps even outside, cleaning you, if you don't want to take your shoes off and track whatever this stuff? Can you be too safe tracking stuff in your house, clean your bottom of your feet off?
America has no worry about Ebola.
No worry.
No worry. They invented it.
Okay.
And anytime you have a devil inventing something, he also has a cure for it and a vaccination against it. You don't just stick it out there without complete control over the virus that he invented.
Okay, and that makes sense. Logical sense.
Just like AIDS is a traded virus, Ebola is the same way.
And these are similar.
Yes.
The two things, AIDS and Ebola, are similar.
And the idea is to depopulate Africa. That's where the wealth is.
That's where the wealth is. Raw resources.
Yes.
Gold.
Yes.
Whatever you can think of. In the ground. But yes. So, how do we, are you saying that those of us, African American, or just humanity, period, in America should not be concerned, we are not at risk in your research? Is that what you're saying? Brother Omar.
You know, yeah, we're not at risk. But
Okay.
let's look at something. This is something I clipped from the article from the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
The policy paper, Rebuilding American Defenses by Project for a New American Century, noted the art of warfare will be vastly different than it is today. Combat likely will take place in a new dimension. Advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare from the realm of terror to a politically useful tool. Now they're going to use germ warfare, not weapons, not ammunition, but the ammunition will be a germ, a virus that can affect you based on your genotype.
Okay.
My doctor, my personal doctor,
Okay.
his brother worked at a university in California, and this has been 20 years ago. And he said that his brother was working on a project that was top secret, funded by the military. His brother quit, left the university, and they told him on the way out the door, if you tell anybody about what we were doing on this project, you will be killed. Okay. And he told his brother this much: they had formed a way to make a virus that could attack and kill you based on your genetic origin in the world.
Okay. Jeffrey, you said you have some stats. And outside, we also talked about the militaries he's just spoken about. And I raised the question, for what purpose? He just put on the table something about the purpose. We said to build facilities to take care of the disease. And while you're at it, give us your stats. Talk about this military, and you'll say we haven't heard anything else from this military.
Yes. Through my research, and if you go back a little bit in time, or maybe Google, you'll remember about a month and a half ago, Obama said that he would send troops to West Africa.
I remember.
In order to build hospitals, possibly even, well, he didn't say this, but you also want to throw in there probably even quarantine zones, quote unquote. Somebody would put out there camps, because definitely they were going to try to keep this controlled. But ever since September, since he mentioned sending troops over there, there has been no other discussion about the troops and what they are doing. But we know they are, I personally know that they are sending troops. I have, along with a lot of the listeners, I'm pretty sure you have family members that are in the military, and they will openly tell you what they are doing, or what Obama have commanded for them to do or put in place for them to do. So we have to be very skeptical. We have to be very aware that they don't tell us everything, and we also have to be very aware that the masses are being controlled based upon confusion and deception. So the things that we don't know really do affect us. So we have to ask a question: why are they there? Are they really building hospitals? And are they really helping? And how can a military help fight something that is biological? Now, just to go back a little bit, and I'm going to tie this in with the statistics that I found, and just to go back and say something about population control. I find it quite interesting that everything that I saw, all the cases in which people have died are in Africa, or here in America, the only casualties to the Ebola virus who have died have been of African descent.
Yes.
So we ask, have there been anybody who outside of African descent who have died from the virus? And as far as my research, I cannot find any. I'm not going to say no, I'm going to say that I have not found it.
Right. Well, we know the young boy was cleared, and we see a document that Omar just passed me, that Christie said the nurse who was quarantined could go home. And we also saw a couple of doctors, maybe 3, came back here supposedly with the virus who lived. So Omar, the African brother, died. Is that suspect to you?
Everything America does is they're suspect.
It's suspect.
Guilty until they're proven innocent.
Okay.
All right. And just to go and provide the stats, we're going to go country by country here.
Okay.
These are stats of people who are cases of Ebola in Guinea. We got 1,667. Out of that 1,667, we have 1,018 deaths. Moving on to Liberia. Liberia has 6,535 cases recorded. Out of those cases, that's 2,413 deaths. The country of Mali, 1 case and 1 death. The country of Nigeria, 20 cases. Out of those 20 cases, we have 8 deaths. Also, the country of Senegal, 1 case and 0 deaths. Sierra Leone, they're also another country that has quite a few cases. 5,338 cases. Out of those cases, we got 1,510 deaths. And of course, the most recent countries, Spain has 1 case, 0 deaths. United States has 4 cases and 1 death. And like I mentioned, 4 to 1, that 1 death was Mr. Eric Duncan, was of African descent.
Okay, so we're down to 17 minutes after 12. Omar, are you familiar with the woman in Kakata, Liberia, who cured her family from the virus? We were talking about that case outside. Are you familiar with that case? You're not. Jeffrey, tell us about that case.
All right, there was a lady in Kakata, Liberia. Last month, I wasn't able to know the exact date or the lady's name. If anybody out there knows her name, you can feel free to provide that information. But this lady had family members who were infected with the deadly Ebola virus. And when their symptoms came down, she took them to the hospital to get treated. but they were turned away from the hospital. So herself being a nurse, took it upon herself to treat her family